Hey everybody, welcome back to Hand of Solomon. Sorry if I look tired and kind of miserable. I just got off of work, it's late, and it's been a long day. Also, the kind of time between the uploads is going to be a little funky just because a lot of times with my full-time job and whatnot, it's going to kind of prevent me from being able to do the videos the way that I really want to. So maybe one day, this can be my full-time job. But until then, I've got to work a regular job. For the next couple of days, we're going to be covering a couple of different ghost stories that are coming out of Kansas. So first up, we'll be covering the Sallie House in Atchison, Kansas. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Then we'll be covering the Wolf Hotel and the haunted tunnels under it in Ellinwood. On top of that, we'll also be covering the Drury Plaza Hotel, or also, it's also called the Broadview Hotel. Let's kick it off with the Sallie House. So the Sallie House, which as we said before is located in Atchison, Kansas. It's claimed to be one of the most haunted places in all of the US. However, just about every place that I have done in these videos, like from the very first one a couple months ago to this one, almost every single one of them says that they're the most haunted place in America or the most haunted place in the world. So after you read those so many times, it kind of loses all of its meaning, because it's like driving past, like, you got Dairy Queen, McDonald's, Burger King, Five Guys, all these places you drive past, every single one's like, we got the best burger in town, baby. No, it's like all these haunted places, like, we're the most haunted, twisted place in all of America, and there's not a single place that can match it. Except for these 5 other places that have the same kind of story as us. But we're gonna ignore that. Anyways, they're still fun though. I just wanted to point that out. I think it's kind of funny. But anyways, carrying on. So this house was originally built around the mid-1800s for Dr. Charles Finney and his family. Dr. Finney actually used the first floor of the home as his practice and his office for his his medical practice and whatnot, while he and his family lived on the second floor of the home. As the story goes, one day Dr. Finney was actually in his office. While he was in there working, he had a knock on the door, and it was a frantic mother carrying her daughter. The mother came in asking for help. She was talking about how when they were back at their house, the girl was outside playing when all of a sudden she doubled over in pain before collapsing to the ground. After kind of explaining what the girl was experiencing and whatnot, Dr. Finney assumed that maybe something was wrong with her appendix, and he was worried that with the symptoms that the girl was experiencing, that it was probably about to rupture at any time. Because of this, he gave her some anesthesia and decided it was best to operate on her right away. So he gives her the anesthesia, they take her to the operating room. Because he's in such a hurry, because he's so frantic about it and whatnot, because he's trying to save this little girl, the anesthesia actually does not kick in time. So by the time he starts cutting into her and performing the procedure, the little girl can actually feel everything. And unfortunately, the little girl did pass away shortly after this. So her last moments were just of her in some stranger's home with this doctor, who she probably didn't know at the time, or was just probably some strange man to her. To her it seemed like she was being tortured while he was really just trying to save her life. With the tragic passing of the girl, the house may have been haunted from that time moving forward. However, the house didn't really begin to garner any attention until 1993, when a young couple and their baby moved into the home. So when they first moved into the home, the husband began to kind of notice some things that were off. Whenever he'd go into a room, he could feel, especially if it was the operating room, or what used to be the operating room of the Sallie House, he could feel these like weird kind of freezing cold, kind of damp patches of air kind of moving around him as he'd go in there, when the rest of the house would be warm. The wife never experienced any of it. Then as time began to go on, he would notice that some of his belongings, or when he'd go into a room, things would begin to kind of like move or like get pushed around or something like that. But it wouldn't happen with the wife's belongings. Then it started to escalate even more from there. Instead of just little objects moving around, they were having small fires breaking out in the house. Typically, wherever the husband was at. And from there, it escalated even further to the point where not only was there these small fires breaking out in their home, but the husband began to experience small scratches or light cuts all across his abdomen. These kind of experiences and whatnot, you know, while they only ever happened to the husband, never really happened to the wife, which eventually led to this ghost getting the nickname of the man-hating ghost. And a lot of people believe that to be because they believe the spirit to be Sally, or at least, you know, something impersonating Sally. People believe that because of her experience in the last few moments of her life, seeing, you know, some strange man torturing her, you know, from her point of view, they believe that because of this ghost likes to take out her frustration and anger at her untimely passing on other men. So other people have actually reported, you know, some similar experiences and whatnot, particularly men who go into the house to, you know, explore it, or they go on the tours or anything like that, or some men who've gone as part of paranormal investigators and whatnot, and, you know, they like to talk about how they've had similar experiences with the scratches or the cuts, or some of them have even had bruises appear on their bodies as well. You know, they can never really explain it because they didn't bump into anything, you know, they didn't really touch anything, but when they come out, they have these, you know, they feel kind of sore and they've got these scratches and stuff on them. Some people who've done, you know, ghost investigations and whatnot in there have claimed that their electronic equipment have malfunctioned in there. They'll come in there with multiple batteries and like backup batteries and stuff like that, but when they actually get in there, you know, the one that's in the machine is like fully drained, you know, so they pop in another one and it's fully drained, and just they go through all the batteries they have and they've all been fully drained even though they charged them before they got there. People have experienced like things moving around, like chairs being in different places, objects being in different places. People have experienced being grabbed, or, you know, like we said before, you know, some people were, you know, particularly men, or experience cuts and scratches and bruises and stuff popping up on them. They've even been a couple of reports of people who had, you know, like these trained emotional support dogs, or just things like that, you know, animals that are trained to help people with their you know, disabilities or whatever it may be. And the dogs will, you know, refuse to go into the home. Like, they'll get real anxious and whatnot, and they won't even want to go into the front door. So, you know, it's a pretty interesting story. I'm sure that the Sally house has probably been covered like a bajillion times. I believe it was on like, you know, like the 40 million ghost hunter TV shows or whatever that's out there and whatnot. But it's always, you know, an interesting one. If you're going to cover Kansas, you know, you got to cover some of the bigger ones, you know what I mean? All right, so as far as my, you know, the way I kind of feel about these stories, or at least this one in particular, you know, I'm going to try out something new, or after I go over a story, and I kind of talk about my thoughts and feelings on it, you know, just trying out a new format, seeing what, you know, works for me. You know, so for this one, you know, it's a pretty tragic story. I mean, imagine being in the shoes of that little girl, you know, and you don't know what's happening to you. You've got this unexplainable pain. It's, you know, it's causing you immense pain, and you're like doubled over, you're collapsing on the ground and stuff. And, you know, the last kind of few thoughts or memories you have as your mom is carrying you to like a doctor is you just show up at someone's house. You know, some dude you've never really met before who just recently moved in is there. They, you know, throw you on a table and the dude just starts cutting into you, and then you pass away. Like, that's got to be super traumatic. And if anything was going to cause a ghost, you know, to form or something like that from unresolved feelings, or, you know, just immense amounts of like agony and stuff like that, it would definitely be, you know, one of the reasons I could see that happening. Because like I said, if you were in those shoes, like, think about how terrifying it was for that little girl, like how terrifying it was for her to have to deal with all of that stuff, you know, shortly before she passed. Like, you know, that's, I mean, I couldn't even really imagine it myself, because it's just something so out there, especially back then. You know, the surgery and the medical practices and stuff like that were so different from the way they are today. So, you know, it's just something I really couldn't imagine. Pretty gruesome story. You know, it's depressing, it's gruesome, and yeah, I mean, that's why it garners a lot of attention when it comes to like ghost stories and stuff like this. You know, God forbid anyone ever has to go through a similar situation with their own child, or, you know, God forbid a child ever has to go through a situation like that ever again. You know, I hope with, you know, modern advances in medicine and whatnot, anything like that's a thing of the past. The Wolf Hotel that was built in Ellinwood. So originally it was built in 1894 by John Wolfe. The particular part we'll be talking about was an addition that was built onto an existing building known as the Delmonico Hotel, and added a whole bunch of new rooms, some underground shops, and a whole bunch of other, like, you know, amenities and whatnot, just kind of bringing it up to date for the standards of that time. So this hotel would have served as a place of rest for those traveling by train, heading out west, and as a hub for people to enter the underground tunnels, which existed in Ellinwood, Kansas. They were there kind of as a way for stores to pass like supplies and stuff along to one another from warehouses and whatnot. But a lot of places actually, like stores actually developed under there, bars, speakeasies and stuff during the Prohibition era. So the underground tunnels in Kansas, you know, in Ellinwood and probably all around the country were, you know, quite the place for a lot of activity and whatnot until they kind of went out of function, you know, 20, 30 years later. So anyways, the Wolfe Hotel, it had places for gambling, places for drinking, you know, it has a very long history in the American Wild West. And as such, you know, there's not really a surprise that, you know, there's actually some, you know, haunted stories behind it. You know, anything with a long history is going to develop some sort of, you know, folklore or some sort of like tragic tale over its long history, because you have so many people coming in and out. You know, you're more than likely going to have something terrible happen at some point. It's unfortunate that it's that way with a lot of things, but yeah, that's just life, you know. So I will say this about the Wolfe Hotel. This one was a pain in the neck to find anything on. Every time you would go in there and look for stuff on it, oh my gosh, all it was the same thing over and over again. It's like, the most haunted place in Kansas, the Wolfe Hotel. Here's how you can find some tickets for the tour, blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, the super scary thing that happened in the Wolfe Hotel. We'll get into it later. But first, have you thought about booking a trip to Kansas? And then you scroll all the way through it and it's just talking about how like awesome a trip to Kansas would be, but never actually gets into the story that it says it would cover later. And it's not like there was a paywall or nothing. Like I'd get all the way to the bottom where you get all those random little ads. And it was like that. Like it took, I was studying this one for like 3 days in a row. And I was just going through Google, like click, 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 every link, doing every variation of, you know, the Wolfe Hotel history, the haunted history of the Wolfe Hotel, yada, 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 all this stuff back and forth. Took forever. Finally found some articles, thank the Lord. And with that little aside, I just want to point that out because it was really frustrating. Awful trying to figure this one out. And I'm glad I eventually found it out. So with that, let's carry on. Let's see here, scrolling through this. So right now in the Wolfe Hotel, there are currently 3 spirits known to haunt the hotel itself. One is of an African-American man. Another is by a man named Bernard Millet. And the third is that of an unknown woman. So for the first story, as the story goes, back between the 1930s and 1960s, there were a set of laws known as the Sundown Laws. Now these laws, awful, terrible, they were racist in origin, they were no good ever. They were put in place to restrict and oppress any minorities living in the community. During the time of these, you know, super backwards laws, you know, there was a, in Ellinwood, there was a local African-American man who was gunned down by the police in Ellinwood for violating the strict curfews that were set out by these laws. The legend has it that this man who was, you know, wrongfully shot, he's come back to haunt the town. And as the story goes, his spirit will actually confront the guests at the Wolfe Hotel, or, you know, he'll try to scare them away from coming to the town, you know, trying to keep people out of coming in and visiting Ellinwood or potentially staying in Ellinwood. Although the kind of twist to it is, though, is even though, you know, there's a lot of people who have talked about how, you know, his spirit, you know, scares these people off and whatnot. There was never really any documented reports from the time of someone being, you know, gunned down because of the violation of those laws in Ellinwood. Although, you know, that was 1930s, 1960s, and just given the kind of political mindset of people at the time, I wouldn't be surprised if it just happened and no one ever recorded it. It's not like stuff like that doesn't happen nowadays where, you know, someone does something wrong and they're like, oops, and they don't, you know, they don't leave any records or anything, or they try to, you know, expunge as much of it as they can from the internet and whatnot. So the next story has to do with the man by the name of Bernard Millet. So on February 24th, 1927, this man checked into the Wolf Hotel in the morning. He came in, he was dressed in his finest clothing. He came in there to the dining room, sat down, and ordered himself a really nice meal. So he ate his meal, you know, enjoyed it, presumably, and right when he had finished his meal, he took out a pistol from his jacket and promoted himself to ghost in front of everyone in the dining room. Sorry for the weird term. I mean, some words TikTok and YouTube doesn't like, so there you go. So while staying in the Wolf Hotel today, you can actually still see the bullet hole in the ceiling from where he did this, which is kind of crazy that no one ever patched it up. It's kind of morbid, kind of crazy, kind of cool, in a weird, morbid, kind of gross kind of way. So no one really knows, you know, what troubled the man to the extent that he would do this. You know, he didn't really talk to anybody. He just kind of came in, ordered his food, ate, and then as soon as he was done eating, just, you know, boom, you know, did the deed. A lot of people say, though, that you can still see his spirit roaming around the dining room, or even just kind of drifting through the hallways, going from room to room, kind of milling about before he vanishes into thin air. And the final story has to do with that of an unknown woman. So there isn't really much that anyone knows about this ghost. You know, they just assume that it's a woman. There's been no real reports of a woman passing away or anything like that. The most people have to go on is there's been some reports of like a ghostly figure that vaguely looks like a woman, that people will see, you know, briefly out of the corner of their eyes before she vanishes. So, you know, who really knows? She isn't aggressive or hateful like many ghosts are. Instead, she's kind of been coined as like a prankster kind of ghost or something like that. So instead of like, you know, trying to scare the Jesus out of people or, you know, try to scare them out of town or whatever, apparently this ghost puts objects under people's pillows just randomly. Like they'll be sleeping and they'll wake up in the morning and there'll be like a toothbrush under their pillow, or, you know, maybe a sock or something. Just something weird just shows up under their pillow. People have reported like their personal items in bathrooms specifically, like, will go missing, or they'll find them just somewhere random, kind of just stashed away. There's not really been anything else that's been reported about this ghost. I just thought it was kind of funny to include it because, you know, imagine being a ghost and the only thing you do is stick stuff under people's pillows or, you know, move their toiletries around. It's funny. It's weird. So I thought it was kind of fun. So I made sure that I wanted to cover that one. It just seems so silly to me. All right, so for my thoughts on these stories, the first one with, you know, the super racist laws and things like that, you know, it's a tragic part of our history. I mean, it's a tragic part of every country's history. Everyone's had some sort of like messed up law at some point. And some places still have messed up laws, but, you know, whether it's real or not that the man, or what happened to that man, you know, it doesn't really matter, because even if it was documented or not, you know, just given the time frame and the nature of the laws and whatnot, it's not out of the realm of possibility for something like that to happen, you know. I mean, that kind of stuff was fairly common back then anyways. The second story, that one is just crazy. It's super crazy to think that a dude would just, I mean, imagine like what kind of stuff would you have to be going through in life for you to just come in, you know, you dress up real nicely, you go in there, you kind of give yourself your final meal, like if you're a prisoner on death row, and just, you know, straight to ghost. You know what I mean? Hey, you know, something had either been troubling him really bad, or maybe he had some sort of like mental health issues or something like that. I don't know. It's just crazy to me. I mean, it's just wild. Like that anyone would ever do something like that to themselves. It's tragic, but you know, it happens, and it's just a fact of reality. The third one, super silly. It kind of seems super out of place with the other two. Like the other two are super morbid. You know, one's about kind of like racism, and the other one's about, you know, not necessarily, well, I guess mental illness in a way, you know, because the depression or whatever drove this man to do what he did. But then you have those two like morbid stories, and then the last story is like, yeah, we've got this silly little prankster ghost, you know, it puts things under your pillow, puts little toothbrushes under your pillow. Just, it's so weird to me. Like, you know, you get the two like really grim ones, but at least at the end you get something kind of nice, kind of lighten the mood a little bit, kind of take your mind off of, you know, the other kind of grim things. As far as the promote to ghost thing phrase, it just at my work, or a little phrase for if someone gets terminated or whatever the hell. They, yeah, Lee, I'm tired. They, we were usually referred to it as promoting them to customer, which I'm sure a lot of places do that. So I just thought it was kind of funny. Put that in there, promote to ghost. Yeah, since the other word, for some reason, is a no-no word, you can't really say that. So I was like, oh, well, the third story is kind of goofy, so I might as well kind of put a little bit of goofy in there to kind of ease the transition into it. But yeah, not a whole lot of thoughts on these stories. It's just, you know, like I said, first two, super tragic. Third one, kind of out there, kind of random, whatever. It's funny. All right, so now on to our third and final story for Kansas. This will be about the Broadview Hotel, which was built in 1922 in Wichita, Kansas. So this hotel has had many additions built onto it throughout the years, making it grander and keeping it up to date, you know, with modern standards and whatnot. The ghost story we'll be looking into, though, takes place shortly after it was built. So as the story goes, in 1929, a young man named Clarence and his wife rented out a room in the hotel. So they were coming to the hotel there was an event going on at the time. I don't know what the event was, couldn't really find any information on it, but for whatever the event was, that's what they were there for. You know, they checked in, they were planning to have, you know, a good time with all the guests, you know, enjoy the event, enjoy the different amenities that the event and the hotel had to offer. However, while they were at the hotel, you know, enjoying the company of the guests and stuff like that, his wife seemed to enjoy the company of the guests a little bit more than he did. So one night, during the ongoing event, Clarence found his wife in the arms of another man. So he was caught up in so much like anger and betrayal and confusion and whatnot during the situation that without even thinking, you know, he pulled a pistol from his coat pocket and fired on the two of them. After this, he ran back to his room, which was on the 8th floor, and threw himself out of the window on his balcony. He unfortunately fell to his demise, and his wife later succumbed to her wounds. So as the story goes, you know, with his passing, there was so much anger and confusion and betrayal that it actually caused his spirit to become stuck in our world, cursed to forever haunt, you know, the place where he had to experience that traumatic memory over and over again. They say that his spirit still roams about the Broadview, tormenting other guests in whatever way that he can. Some people have reported seeing him appear in front of them while they're walking down the hallways, only for him to be gone in the blink of an eye. Others have claimed that while they're staying up on the 8th floor, you know, they'll be returning back to their room when they'll hear a man from a couple of rooms further up the hallway call out for them. When they go to you know, check it out and see what's going on, there's no one there. You know, they'll look all around, there won't be signs of anybody there. Sometimes even the other rooms that are up there haven't even been rented out. And then there's also been reports of, like, you know, items going missing. You know, it's a very common thing amongst a lot of these hauntings and whatnot, is, you know, items tend to go missing or get misplaced or moved around or something like that. One thing that I found interesting, though, is one big thing that people report is that the rooms in their rooms, the phones that every like hotel has that are like connected back down to the front desk, that kind of late at night the phone will start ringing. You know, they'll go and answer it, and there's no one there, just in kind of an empty line. They hang up, only for the phone to start ringing again immediately. So they snatch it up to answer again, and again, no one's on the line, so they hang up. And this will continue throughout the night. Like, it'll just keep ringing and ringing and ringing. And even if they don't answer it, as soon as it stops ringing, it'll pick right back up. You know, and it'll keep on going and keep on going. You know, preventing them from getting any sort of sleep or anything like that. So many people actually believe that those phones ringing and whatnot has to do with Clarence's spirit. And it's kind of his way of, you know, tormenting people, you know, because he's being tormented, you know, so he's going to torment everybody else. One story in particular, it was one of the only like actual like particular examples from it. There was a lady who I think it was a flight attendant or something like that. She was coming back up to her room for the night, and when she walked into her room, all the curtains on all the windows and whatnot were like flat up against the ceiling, like as if gravity either wasn't affecting them or someone had tied them up there. You know, they're just like stuck flat up there, and they didn't move or nothing like that. And it freaked the lady out so bad that she later, you know, she went down to the lobby and slept on one of the couches in the lobby. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to do that because those couches are nasty. I used to work at a hotel. So though Clarence is like, you know, the most active spirit here, there are stories of another ghost or possibly multiple ghosts that are there as well. Aside from your typical ghostly activities like flickering of lights or, you know, footsteps coming from like empty hallways and stuff like that, some people have claimed to have heard like the giggles of a little girl or like the footsteps of a little girl that seemingly come out of nowhere. There haven't really been any stories from what I could find as far as like a little girl who might have had something happen to her at the hotel or anything. Most people believe that really it's just the spirit of a girl who went there one time for vacation and loved it so much that later on in life, when she did eventually pass, her spirit came back to the hotel because that's where she had had so many fond memories in the past. As far as this story goes, you know, I mean, if you were in a situation where you're at like this big, you know, event that you came for and, you know, you're all having a good time and whatnot, and you came downstairs to visit the rest of the party members and whatnot, and you found your wife in the arms of someone else, and it was pretty obvious what was going on. I mean, I would be furious too. I wouldn't be so furious as to the point where I was gonna pull out a gun and commit a crime and then later throw myself out of a window. But I mean, that's just me. I know, you know, things like that affect everyone differently. You know, is affected by their emotions differently and whatnot. But I mean, it's still a pretty crazy story. And that's, you know, common with a lot of ghost stories is, you know, there's some sort of tragedy, there's some sort of betrayal or a wrongful killing, or oh, I said the bad word, or, you know, wrongful passing or something like that, or, you know, just something tragic behind it. And the reason for that, you know, is a lot of times people believe that those tragic events, you know, those, you know, really intense moments of emotions and whatnot are enough to either leave an imprint of the person in this world, you know, like kind of like a spectral imprint or something like that in this world of that person, where they're still like continually experiencing those emotions, which is why you get a lot of angry ghosts. Or that it's just, you know, there's so much regret and so much hatred and things like that in these people when they passed, that their spirits came back and they're just kind of stuck feeling that forever because it was so strong in the moment of their passing that that's, you know, how it is forever. So, you know, it's a shame that a lot of stories with ghosts and whatnot are, you know, tragic like that. You know, you get very many of them where it's just something silly like the toothbrush pillow ghost or whatever, or the little girl who just liked going on vacation there, so her spirit wanted to come back. You know, you don't get those a whole lot. It kind of sucks, but it makes the silly ones or the more lighthearted ones even more enjoyable once you actually, you know, kind of stumble across those when you actually get to them. So I just want to thank you guys all for watching. You know, I really hope that you're enjoying these kind of new styles of videos, kind of how I mixed them up a little bit. You know, I'm really trying to get the hang of making these videos and really trying to work around my full-time work schedule so that I can, you know, make these videos, so I can do the research and bring something of, you know, decent quality to you guys. That way, you know, something entertaining. I don't want to just, you know, copy, paste, whatever the hell, and just be, you know, knock off this guy or great value version that guy or whatever, you know, whatever. So I really hope you guys are enjoying these videos. You know, like I said, maybe one day I can make this as my full-time job and I can bring videos more regularly. But until then, the video posts are going to be irregular. I've got to work around my full-time job. But I want to thank you guys for supporting me, and I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.